Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Welcome back to Two Neanderthals.
And
This time we're in my house
yeah,
rather than at Two Creeks Farm. So no
uh,
roosters. The occasional fox and the occasional deer, but no roosters.
uh, a cold winter day in west central Georgia.
Yeah, cold by our standards is anything under 40 degrees, by the way.
Um, so, so Eric,
Yeah, Mark.
I was talking earlier about watching the first State of the Union address that I've watched on purpose in 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my first one.
Yeah?
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't think I've watched one.
Well, um, actually, to be truthful, it was probably more like 15 or 20 years since I had actually sat down with intention and watched the State of the Union address.
And what did you think?
It was, I was struck by several things. The first thing that I was struck by was I expected the partisanship, but I saw this splash of white on the right side of the room, and it was all of these representatives in the white dresses and blouses and um, different attire, scarves and whatnot, and Pelosi, and I didn't know I had no idea what that was about. But as the State of the Union went on, it was pretty obvious what it was about with Ocasio-Cortez in the front row,
Yeah,
and
she's become a kind of celebrity.
yeah, just all of a sudden, and I don't know what the credentialing or the pedigree is to become an instant celebrity as a freshman congressperson.
I
But
think it's the absence of pedigree is the pedigree.
well, there you go. But well, but anyway, and it accentuated the division
Hmm.
to me. It accentuated because they wouldn't even clap and applaud and stand up or acknowledge things that I would think would be on their plate, their agenda, their
In their wheelhouse.
yeah, yeah, and it's almost like they seem to look at each other first, like, do we applaud? Oh, let's applaud. Yeah, do we stand up for that one? Yeah, we'll stand up for that one.
Mm.
And I did, and I noticed the same thing on the other side too. But as I said, it underscored that because they were all dressed alike, and the first thing that popped in my mind was the herd mentality
Yeah.
of
Kind of an automaticity to it, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
very
We all have
much.
to applaud at the same time. We all have to stand at the same time. We all have to have a kind of unified voice and presence, and there can't be any perceived dissension within our ranks or
Yeah,
deviation.
and then the president spent most of the address, unless it was my imagination, he seemed to be turned a little this way, away from that side of the room,
Mm.
as he addressed everyone. He addressed everybody in the room, but he was turned more this way, and there's so much glaring. And then you had said something that had never heard of before was a lot of the online games, like the games that I play and other people that I know, have these NPCs, non-player characters.
Yeah.
And you made a really interesting observation about that.
Right. Well, the term NPC, of course, it came from gaming, and but it's now being applied to people who not too long ago were known as social justice warriors, which refers to people whose sort of primary cause and agenda has to do with producing this condition, social justice, which has to do with promoting sort of minorities' advantages and I guess women's advantages and anyone who's perceived to be in an oppressed class, more or less, sort of promoting that. And what they're trying to get at, the people who, I think it came out of 4chan actually, what a lot of these sort of weird things come out of 4chan. It refers to kind of the roboticism of it.
Yeah,
That there's a
yeah.
certain automaticity to it.
It's scripted
And,
almost.
Yeah, it's like a kind of scripted quality where once you sort of trigger the initial response, the rest of it just sort of trots itself out with a kind of predictable regularity, and it's meant to sort of parody, I think, the lack of, I guess, active cogitation or thinking or perception, and deferring instead to a kind of roboticism or herd mentality. So the comparison is between a pre-programmed gaming character that has no, self-awareness or what is the phrase I'm looking for? Sort of
Independent
sentience,
thinking?
yeah, independent thinking, that sort of thing, and a robot, and how we sometimes act so damn robotically.
Yeah.
Like we are in a certain way like NPCs, and I don't think it's limited to the left, by the way,
Oh, no.
or to social justice
Oh, no.
warriors or any other class. Like, I think this is a very human particularity. So it's a very human temptation when we don't want to go through all the work,
But
of
it's
thinking things through.
Yeah.
We start to act like robots and lemmings and just sort of look and, oh, you have the same color shirt, I guess we have to stand now.
for the
And-
same things
Yeah.
and not stand for the same
Yeah.
things. So that's it. It was such a scripted feel to,
Yeah.
almost like they had all choreographed the whole hour and a half or however long it was that I finally went to bed. Of the State of the Union address, and then of course it was the only thing in the news for several days after, and it almost had the feeling of some kind of dystopian entertainment.
Like something out of an Orwell book, or
Yes.
Brave New World, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. So I watched it with just really I felt profoundly sad at times. I felt profoundly proud at times when he introduced some of these people. But even those particular individuals that, as always in the State of the Union, that are the citizens that have overcome some adversity or whatever it is, they're there for it. Again, the best analogy I can come up with is they're there for the entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
They're there for to pull at the emotions of the people watching the State of the Union.
I think a lot of events like the State of the Union address are more about a kind of theatricality than they are about informing anyone of anything. Like, the real message is in the performance rather than in the content or the information per se. And so that doesn't surprise me that you were taken on an emotional tour, basically, because I think that's exactly what is intended. And I think that, maybe part of the automaticity feeds into that. You used earlier, Mark, the metaphor of being scripted, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the theatricality of events like that, and maybe to an extent a large fraction of our lives, is about being scripted. And so the interesting question,
Yeah.
there are two interesting questions, I think, is when, if anywhere, do we deviate from the scripts we've been handed in one way or another? Or another way of asking that would be, where does actual thinking and reflection and sense-making occur that deviates from just reading the next line off the damn script?
Well, and so there was no point at which there was, an encouragement or to move ahead. This is how we will move ahead. It was just, this is our agenda. This is not your agenda. These are our objectives. These are not your objectives, and this is how we're going to reach our objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a dichotomy that's almost inferred in the feeling of the room, of the situation.
Well, it's an us-them dichotomy in part. Like us and our agenda and our thinking and our ideology, as opposed to those we've coded as the enemy or the opposition somehow. And when you think about it, damn, what a simplistic way of seeing life in the world.
Yeah.
Because life, because it's such a complicated thing is full of all kinds of weird textures and colors and vectors, and it's hardly ever just us or them.
Well, and to wax philosophical just for a minute, let me digress just a bit, because I think a big part of this is a reflection of the symptoms of our culture generally. And it has to do, for me, it has to do a lot with the speed of life, the edifice that we've set up for ourselves to support our culture. The machinery, the mechanics has propelled us at such a speed during our day, during our everyday living, that we only catch the surface like a rock skipping across the water. When I was a kid, my grandpa taught me how to throw that rock.
Me too.
And it catches a little bit of under the water, but mostly it's just skipping across the top.
Yeah, that's not a bad metaphor for, I think, the rapidity of our lives and the lack of depth. We aren't stones that seek the depths much anymore.
Yeah, but
we're stones that skip over the surface of the water a lot of the time.
As long as it's sliding and moving fast in the horizontal plane, it's not getting any depth. And that's reflected in so many ways, even in our field of psychology. A lot of programs in universities now are called behavioral science programs. They're not even known as psychology programs anymore. And that's a perfect example right there. To me, it's all based on this superficial. Maybe superficial is not the right word, but this visible feature of behavior, and then behavior modification, therapy, and these other things that we try to implement to change the behaviors, but still not teaching people how to do that deep thinking for themselves.
Right. Well, I'm pretty sure you're aware, especially because you're a Jungian, that the word psychology comes from two Greek words, one of which is psyche in Greek, means soul, right? Feminine noun, in Greek. So I think the loss of the sense of depth as we move from psychology to something like behavioral science, like one marker of that sort of abandoned depth would be we're maybe no longer interested in the soul anymore. And someone in one of my videos recently asked me, what is the soul? Because I kept using that word in the video. And because I approach things very phenomenologically, I say, well, the word soul is a linguistic marker for the kinds of experiences we have when what we are feels deep.
Yeah.
So it's a marker of the sensation of deepness, whatever that means, and it probably varies to an extent from person to person. But when you look inside and you see not merely a play of surfaces, but you see this sort of z-axis dimension of depth, and you don't just see it, like you feel it, like it infuses you. You in your experience, you feel like a deep being, a profound being. That's maybe part of what we lose in politics.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that I think a lot of politics very often brings out the worst in us, to be honest. Like a lot of herd mentality, crowd mentality, automaticity, NPC type behavior, and so on. Pre-programmed scripted behavior, choreographed behavior. But I think there's sort of a parallelism between what you saw in the State of the Union address and what you're also seeing within psychology generally, and this loss of the sense of soul or the depth of our lives, like this loss of the sense that we are stones who have been born to this world in part to sink into its depths and to sort of feel the pressure around us. The depths when you're in deep water, you feel the pressure.
But that can only be done when the momentum slows enough to allow the depth.
Well, that's the problem. See, I have no problem with surfaces, and I have no problem with depths. What I have a problem with is the exclusionary principle that sometimes comes into play, where all there is either surfaces or depths. Surface is part of life too, right? So this is not a way of putting down, inhabiting the surfaces of things, but it's a way of putting down, in my mind, the refusal to go into the other side.
There's no balance.
Yeah, and my God, what would happen if a politician for once said something deep and genuinely powerful at the level of soul, I don't know what would happen to this nation. Like they talk about, well, it would break the internet. Well, you know, there'd be breakage along many dimensions beyond that. Like if for just one damn time in my life, I've been alive 58 years. So I was born when Eisenhower was president. Pretty damn impressive, isn't it, out there, YouTube? But if in all those years, like part of the reason why I haven't listened to this State of the Union address is because nothing genuinely important gets said, or hardly ever in that sphere. It's all play of surfaces. So I think, you know, if you wonder about what would it take to revolutionize politics or our lives, you know, I think you're touching on it, Mark, like that soul depth dimension. I think a lot of the time is what is missing, because we spend our lives, you know, trying to get to the next weekend, trying to be entertained. Like I was telling Mark that my wife and I are watching Breaking Bad. We're sort of binge watching that, and it's like, oh, it's so entertaining, and oh, synthesizing meth in a trailer is so interesting, and so on. But that's like play of surfaces too, right? You know. And I guess I'm trying to stop my rant.
Well, it's a good rant, and it's needful. And I just want to mention that you are considerably older than me, because I was born when Kennedy was president.
Oh, yeah, you young whippersnapper.
Yeah.
And your newfangled Kennedy-isms.
So I guess our point is that it seems needful for us to try to get some balance culturally for seeing the depth in the everyday, and not only the surface frenetic busyness that we involve ourselves in.
In Buddhism, we call that monkey mind. You know, when your mind is just, in your awareness is just like flitting from thing to thing in a very transient way, very rapid way. But yeah, I agree with you, except the only thing I would change in what you said, Mark, is it's not just a matter of seeing it. I think more importantly, it's a matter of feeling it.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Like from moment to moment.
I think that would be a good follow-up video to this, of looking at the depth in life as opposed to the surface, the depth in the surface, and how where the intersection is for that.
Yeah, I think that would be a neat idea. Maybe we'll do that one if we still have time. I've got to go help fix my son's car pretty soon, but
we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time, and thanks for hanging with us. 2 Neanderthals coming at you, Carrollton, Georgia.
Bye.
Be there.